Robert Harrison stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his office on the 45th floor, watching the city lights flicker like stars below. In his hand, he held a photograph that he'd been staring at for the past 20 minutes. It showed a young woman with bright eyes and an infectious smile, laughing at something off-camera. That woman was his daughter, Claire. But the girl in that photo didn't exist anymore. 3 years had passed since the accident. 3 years since the drunk driver ran the red light. 3 years since his wife died on impact. And Claire survived without a scratch on her body. At least that's what the doctor said. No broken bones. No internal injuries. Nothing physically wrong with her at all. But something inside Claire had broken that night. Something the X-rays and MRI scans couldn't detect. She hadn't smiled since. Hadn't laughed. Barely spoke unless absolutely necessary. She moved through their mansion like a shadow, present but not really there. Her eyes, once full of life, had become dull and distant, as if she was looking at the world through foggy glass. Robert had tried everything. He'd brought in the best therapists from New York, Los Angeles, even flew in specialists from Switzerland and Japan. He'd spent millions on treatments, experimental therapies, meditation retreats. Nothing worked. Claire would sit through the sessions, nod occasionally, answer questions in single words, and then return to her room where she'd stare out the window for hours. The guilt was eating him alive. He'd been at a business meeting that night. If he'd been home, if he'd driven them himself, if he'd insisted his wife stay home, maybe things would be different. Maybe his wife would still be alive. Maybe his daughter would still know how to smile. 2 weeks ago, at a charity event, Robert had too much to drink. Not drunk, just loose enough that when a reporter asked him what he wanted most in the world, he answered honestly. "I'd give anything to see my daughter smile again," he'd said. Anything, the reporter had pressed further. Anything? What does that mean for a billionaire? Robert had looked directly into the camera. "I mean it. Anyone who can make my daughter genuinely smile again, I'll give them $100 million in company shares and my blessing to marry her." He'd meant it as a desperate plea, a father's broken promise to the universe. He hadn't expected what happened next. The story went viral within hours. By morning it was on every news channel, every social media platform, every tabloid website. His phone exploded with calls. His lawyers were panicking. His board of directors were scheduling emergency meetings. But Robert didn't care. He'd said what he said, and he wasn't taking it back. The first suitors arrived within 48 hours. A famous comedian from Los Angeles showed up at the mansion gates with a camera crew, confident he could make anyone laugh. Robert let him in, hoping against hope. The comedian performed for 30 minutes in the living room, doing his best material, voices, physical comedy, everything that had made him millions. Claire sat on the sofa, hands folded in her lap, watching him with those empty eyes. When he finished, she simply stood up and walked back to her room without a word. Then came the motivational speakers, the life coaches, the Instagram influencers with their positive energy and carefully crafted messages of hope. They arrived with vision boards and affirmations with stories of triumph over tragedy. Claire sat through each presentation like a statue, some of them left in tears, moved by their own words but frustrated by her lack of response. The mansion became a circus. A famous actor flew in from his movie set, convinced his charm could break through. A tech entrepreneur arrived with virtual reality equipment, promising to show Claire worlds beyond her pain. A young artist painted a mural in the garden, explaining each brushstroke's meaning. A classical pianist played for 3 hours straight. A trained therapy dog was brought in. Even a celebrity chef prepared elaborate meals, believing that taste and beauty could awaken something in her. Nothing worked. Claire remained unreachable, locked behind walls no one could climb. The media camped outside the gates. They analyzed every person who entered, placing bets on who would succeed. Some called Robert a genius for his marketing stunt. Others called him exploitative, saying he was using his daughter's pain for publicity. The truth was simpler and sadder. He was just a desperate father who'd run out of options. Robert's head of security, Tom, compiled a list of everyone requesting entry. It grew longer every day. Fortune hunters, obviously. Gold diggers who saw $100 million and didn't care about the broken girl behind the prize. But there were others too. Genuine people who'd heard the story and wanted to help. Teachers, nurses, counselors, regular folks who thought maybe, just maybe, they had something to offer. Robert met with each one personally. He could usually tell within 5 minutes who was there for the money and who actually cared. But he let them all try anyway because what if? What if the solution came from an unexpected place? What if someone he dismissed could have been the answer? By the end of the first month, over 200 people had attempted to make Claire smile. The mansion staff were exhausted from the constant stream of visitors. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, complained that she couldn't keep up with the mess. The groundskeeper was frustrated by the damage to the gardens from all the photo shoots and performances. But Robert noticed something. While everyone else was tired and annoyed, one person went about his work as if nothing had changed. The night janitor, a quiet man in his early 30s who'd worked at the estate for 2 years, continued his routine without complaint. While others rushed to see Claire, hoping for their chance at glory, this man simply cleaned the halls, emptied the trash, and went home before dawn. Robert didn't even know his name. He made a mental note to ask Mrs. Chen later. Claire's daily routine hadn't changed despite the chaos. She woke at 7, ate breakfast alone in her room, spent the day reading or staring out windows, and around 2 in the morning, she'd go to the garden. She'd sit on the same bench where her mother used to read to her when she was little. She'd stay there for an hour, sometimes 2, just sitting in the darkness before returning to her room. Robert watched her through the security cameras. It broke his heart every single time. She looked so small on that bench, so lost. He wanted to go to her, to hold her like he did when she was little and had nightmares. But he'd tried that before, and she'd just stiffened in his arms, waiting for him to let go. The anniversary of the accident was approaching. 3 years since everything fell apart. Robert feared what that day might bring. Would it make things worse? Would Claire retreat even further into herself? He made a decision. If nothing changed by the anniversary, he'd call off the whole thing. No more suitors. No more circus. He'd accept that his daughter might never smile again. And he'd focus on just being there for her, even if she couldn't respond. What Robert didn't know was that every night while the mansion slept, while he reviewed security footage and wrestled with his guilt, while the world outside continued its speculation and judgment, something small was beginning to happen in that garden. Something quiet and unexpected. Something that had nothing to do with $100 million prizes or grand gestures or desperate attempts to force joy. In the darkness of that garden, beside the bench where a broken girl sat alone with her grief, someone was simply being present, not trying, not performing, just being. And sometimes that's exactly what broken people need. His name was Vincent Torres, and nobody paid attention to him. That's how he preferred it these days. Every night at 10 o'clock, Vincent arrived at the Harrison estate with his cleaning cart, his worn backpack, and a thermos of coffee his mother made. He'd clock in at the service entrance, exchange a brief nod with the night security guard, and begin his routine. First floor, second floor, offices, hallways, bathrooms. He worked methodically, listening to audiobooks through one earbud while his hands moved on autopilot. The other staff members whispered about the chaos, about the suitors competing for Claire's smile and the $100 million prize. During shift changes, Vincent would hear the day staff complaining about entitled rich people treating the mansion like a reality TV set. But by the time Vincent started his shift, the visitors were gone. The mansion was quiet. Just him and the silence. He'd been working there for 2 years, ever since everything fell apart. Before that, he'd been a pediatric nurse at Children's Memorial Hospital. He'd loved that job, loved helping kids, making them laugh when they were scared, holding their hands during painful procedures. He'd been good at it too. The parents trusted him. The kids asked for him by name, then came the incident. A medication error, a child who went into distress. Vincent had been the nurse on duty, and when the investigation started, all evidence pointed to him. He tried to explain that he'd followed the chart exactly as written, that something was wrong with the prescription itself. But the hospital had powerful lawyers, and Vincent had nothing but his word. He lost his license, lost his career, lost his reputation. The legal battle drained every penny he'd saved and left him buried in debt. His mother, already struggling with diabetes and heart problems, worried herself sick over him. He needed to support her, pay off the lawyers, keep their small apartment. So he took whatever work he could find. Dishwasher at a diner, stock clerk at a warehouse, night janitor at a billionaire's mansion. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent years training to help people, to heal children, and now he scrubbed toilets for people who'd never even look at him. But Vincent didn't let bitterness consume him. His mother had taught him better than that. "Life knocks us down sometimes," she'd say in her soft voice, her accent still thick after 40 years in America. "But we don't stay down. We find new ways to stand." So Vincent stood. He worked 3 jobs, slept 4 hours a night, and visited his mother every Sunday with groceries and her medications. He was tired, bone tired, but he was standing. 2 weeks into the suitor circus, Vincent first saw Claire in the garden. It was around 2:30 in the morning. He'd finished the main house and was taking out trash to the bins near the garden path when he noticed her. A small figure sitting alone on a bench, barely visible in the dim landscape lighting. He almost called out, thinking it might be an intruder. Then he realized who it was, the daughter. The girl everyone was trying so hard to save. Vincent watched for a moment, staying in the shadows. She wasn't doing anything, just sitting there staring at nothing. He could see her face in profile, pale and expressionless. She looked like one of those marble statues in museums. Beautiful but cold. There but not there. Something about the scene stuck with him. Maybe it reminded him of the kids he used to care for, the ones who'd withdrawn into themselves after trauma. Maybe it was the loneliness radiating from that small figure. Maybe it was just recognition. One broken person seeing another. He didn't approach her. What would he say? He was nobody. Just a janitor. And unlike the parade of people trying to win that prize, Vincent had no illusions about fixing anyone. You couldn't fix people. They had to find their own way back. But the next night, when he took out the trash at the same time, she was there again. Same bench, same position, like a ghost haunting the place where Joy used to live. On the 3rd night, Vincent made a decision. He finished his work a bit early, grabbed his backpack, and walked to the garden. He didn't approach her bench. Instead, he sat on another bench about 20 feet away, separated by a small rose bush. Far enough to not be intrusive. Close enough to not leave her completely alone. From his backpack, he pulled out a sheet of paper and began to fold. Origami had been his mother's hobby, learned in her childhood in the Philippines. When Vincent was young and couldn't sleep, she'd sit with him and fold paper cranes, paper boats, paper flowers. Her hands would move with practiced grace, and she'd hum old lullabies in Tagalog. The repetitive motions, the soft humming, it calmed him. Eventually, he learned to fold too. Now, sitting in the garden of a billionaire's mansion, Vincent's hands remembered those lessons. He folded a crane first, then another. His mother had taught him that 1,000 paper cranes could grant a wish. He didn't believe in wishes anymore, but the folding itself was meditative, peaceful. He began to hum without thinking about it. One of his mother's lullabies. He'd probably gotten the tune wrong after all these years, but it didn't matter. Nobody was listening anyway, except someone was. Vincent didn't look at Claire, didn't acknowledge her presence. He just kept folding, kept humming. After 30 minutes, he gathered his paper cranes, placed them gently on the bench beside him, and left. He had to finish his shift and get to his morning job at the warehouse by 6. The next night, she was there again. Vincent returned to his bench with more paper. He folded a butterfly this time, then a frog, then a flower. The pile of origami grew on the bench beside him. This became his routine. Every night after finishing his cleaning, he'd spend 30 minutes in the garden folding paper. Sometimes he hummed, sometimes he worked in silence. He never tried to talk to Claire, never looked at her directly. He treated her like she wasn't even there, which was somehow more respectful than what everyone else was doing. A week passed, then 2. The day staff started noticing the paper figures. They'd find them on windowsills, on tables tucked into corners. Vincent left them wherever he felt like it. A small paper crane on the kitchen counter, a paper lotus on the library shelf. Tiny bits of simple beauty scattered throughout the mansion. Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper, asked him about it one morning during shift change. "These paper things, they're yours?" Vincent nodded while putting away his cleaning supplies. "Yes, sir. Sorry if they're in the way. I can stop." No, she said quickly. "They're lovely." Claire's father asked about them. "He thinks they're helping somehow." Vincent shrugged. He didn't know anything about helping. He was just folding paper because it reminded him of better times. But something was happening, though Vincent didn't realize it yet. Robert Harrison sat in his office late one night. watching security footage from the garden camera. He'd started reviewing these recordings after his head of security mentioned someone was meeting with Claire regularly. Robert had assumed it was another suitor sneaking in, someone trying to bypass the official channels. Instead, he saw his night janitor sitting on a bench, folding paper. Robert watched night after night of footage. The janitor never approached Claire, never spoke to her, just sat there creating tiny paper sculptures and leaving them behind. And Claire, his unreachable daughter, was watching. Her head would turn slightly toward the janitor. Her eyes would follow the movement of his hands. It was the first time in 3 years that Claire had shown interest in anything. Robert pulled the janitor's employment file. Vincent Torres, 32 years old. 3 personal references, all glowing. Work history showed the janitorial position, plus 2 other part-time jobs. Before that, there was a gap. Robert dug deeper. What he found made him sit back in his chair. Vincent Torres had been a pediatric nurse. A good one, by all accounts. Then came a lawsuit, an investigation, a license revocation. Robert had his legal team pull the case files. The more he read, the more obvious it became. The hospital had needed a scapegoat for a doctor's prescription error. Vincent had been convenient. Robert felt something shift in his chest. This man, this janitor who nobody noticed, had lost everything. And yet here he was, sitting in a garden at 2 a.m, folding paper for a girl who couldn't smile, expecting nothing in return. Meanwhile, the circus outside continued. More suitors arrived daily, each one more elaborate than the last. A famous magician performed illusions. A technology guru demonstrated holograms. A spiritual leader led a group meditation session. The media coverage intensified. Social media buzzed with theories and betting pools. Nobody paid attention to the night janitor who came and went like a shadow. Vincent's mother noticed he seemed lighter somehow during his Sunday visits. "You look less tired," she observed, watching him put away groceries in her small kitchen. "I've been sleeping a bit better," he admitted. "Something good happening at work?" Vincent thought about the garden, about the quiet presence on the other bench, about the simple act of folding paper under the stars. "Maybe," he said. "Maybe something small." His mother smiled, that knowing smile parents have. "Small good things can become big good things. You'll see." On the 15th night, something changed. Vincent arrived at his usual bench with his paper and found something waiting for him. A single paper crane, clumsily folded, lopsided and wrinkled, sitting exactly where he usually sat. He picked it up carefully, turning it over in his hands. The folds were rough, unpracticed, but someone had tried. Someone had watched him fully. The paper animals multiplied throughout the mansion like a quiet invasion. Staff members would find them in unexpected places each morning. A tiny elephant on the dining room table, a delicate butterfly on a bookshelf, a school of fish swimming across the windowsill in the hallway. Nobody knew that half of them weren't made by Vincent anymore. Claire had started creating her own. Her folds were getting better. Still imperfect, still rough around the edges, but improving. She'd spend her days in her room practicing, watching online tutorials with the sound muted, her hands working through the motions over and over. At night, she'd bring her creations to the garden and leave them for Vincent to find. They still didn't speak. Didn't need to. The paper said everything. A crane meant "I'm here." A frog meant "tonight was difficult." A lotus meant "thank you." They developed their own silent language, understood only by 2 people who'd forgotten how to use words. Robert watched it all unfold through security footage. He'd stopped taking meetings, stopped caring about the business. His board was getting restless, but he couldn't look away from the screens. His daughter was coming back. Slowly, quietly, but definitely coming back. He researched Vincent's case obsessively, read every document, every testimony, every piece of evidence. The more he learned, the angrier he became. Vincent had been railroaded. The real culprit was a doctor who'd written the wrong dosage, but the hospital had protected their doctor and sacrificed their nurse. It was cleaner that way, cheaper, less liability. Robert had his lawyers draft documents. He'd make this right somehow, but he kept it quiet. Vincent didn't know he was being watched. Didn't know that the billionaire whose floors he mopped was planning to overturn his entire case. The media circus reached new heights. A celebrity couple arrived, proposing to stage a wedding ceremony to remind Claire of love and joy. An adventure athlete wanted to take Claire skydiving to shock her system into feeling alive. A poet planned to recite verses for 24 hours straight. Each attempt was more desperate and absurd than the last. Claire endured them all with the same blank expression. She'd sit through whatever performance was scheduled, her body present but her mind clearly elsewhere, probably thinking about paper folds, Vincent guessed, probably counting the hours until everyone left and she could return to the garden. Vincent found it darkly amusing. All these people trying so hard, spending so much energy, doing everything wrong. They approached Claire like she was a puzzle to solve, a problem to fix, a prize to win. They didn't see her as a person, just as an obstacle between them and $100 million. He understood why she couldn't respond to that. Who would? 3 weeks into their silent routine, something unexpected happened. Vincent arrived at the garden later than usual. His shift at the warehouse had run long because someone called in sick, and he'd had to cover extra hours. He was exhausted, running on coffee and sheer determination. It was almost 4 a.m. by the time he made it to his bench. Claire was still there. She'd waited. Vincent felt something twist in his chest. She'd been sitting there for 2 hours, maybe more, in the cold night air, waiting for someone who was just a janitor, someone who didn't matter, someone who had nothing to offer her. He sat down heavily, his body aching from 14 hours of work across 2 jobs. He pulled out paper from his backpack, but his hands were shaking from fatigue. The first fold went wrong. He tried again. Wrong again. His exhausted brain couldn't remember the sequence. Frustrated, he put the paper down and rubbed his face. He was so tired, too tired. He hadn't slept more than 4 hours in the past 3 days. His mother's medication had gone up in price and he'd picked up extra shifts to cover it. He was running himself into the ground, and for what? To fold paper for a girl who couldn't smile? To work jobs that would never be careers? To pay off debts for something that wasn't even his fault? The weight of it all crashed over him suddenly. 3 years of holding it together. 3 years of standing when he wanted to fall. 3 years of pretending he was okay when everything was broken. He didn't mean to, but he started crying. Silent tears at first, then actual sobs that shook his shoulders. He couldn't stop. Couldn't control it. All the grief and frustration and exhaustion poured out of him in the darkness of that garden. He didn't hear Claire approach. Didn't realize she'd moved until he felt her sit down beside him on his bench. The first time she'd left her spot, the first time she'd crossed that invisible boundary, she didn't touch him. Didn't speak. Just sat there 2 feet away, present with his pain the way he'd been present with hers. Vincent tried to apologize, tried to pull himself together. "I'm sorry," he managed between gasps. "I'm okay."
"I'm fine,
I'm just tired." Claire's voice was rough from years of disuse, barely above a whisper. "You don't have to be fine." Those were the first words she'd spoken to him. The first words she'd spoken to anyone in weeks. And they cut straight through to the truth he'd been avoiding. He didn't have to be fine. Nobody did. The world kept insisting people should hold it together, smile through the pain, stay strong. But sometimes strength looked like falling apart. Sometimes healing required breaking first. Vincent's sobs gradually subsided. They sat in silence, 2 broken people on a bench while the sky slowly lightened toward dawn. "I was driving," Claire said suddenly. Her voice was flat, factual. "The night of the accident. My mother and I were coming back from dinner. I was driving because she'd had wine. A car ran the red light. I swerved. We hit a pole. My side was fine. Her side..." She stopped. Vincent waited. "Everyone says it wasn't my fault. The other driver was drunk. I couldn't have avoided it. All the logical things. But she's still dead. And I was driving. I should have reacted faster. Should have swerved differently. Should have seen it coming somehow." "You can't see drunk drivers coming," Vincent said quietly. "They're unpredictable. That's what makes them dangerous. My father doesn't blame me. The police don't blame me. The lawyers don't blame me. Everyone's very careful to tell me it's not my fault." Claire's voice cracked. "But I blame me. I've blamed me every single day for 3 years. Vincent understood. He'd lived in that same prison. "I was blamed for something that wasn't my fault," he said. "The kid nearly died on my watch. Wrong medication dosage. I administered what the chart said, but the chart was wrong. The doctor who wrote it made a mistake. But when things went wrong, everyone pointed at me. The nurse. The easy target. I tried to fight it, but I had no proof, no power, no money for good lawyers. So I lost everything. That's not fair, Claire whispered. No, it's not. But fair doesn't matter much in the real world. Vincent wiped his face with his sleeve. I was angry for a long time. Really angry. At the hospital, at the doctor, at the system, at God, at everything. The anger was eating me alive. How did you stop being angry? I didn't, not completely. I'm still angry sometimes. But I realized something. The anger was keeping me stuck in that moment. The moment everything fell apart. And if I stayed stuck there, they won. The people who did this to me, they got to take my present and my future too. Not just my past. Claire absorbed this. So you just let it go? No, I moved forward with it. There's a difference. I'm still angry about what happened. I still think it was wrong. But I don't let it be the only thing I am anymore. I work jobs I don't love. I fold paper because it makes me feel peaceful. I visit my mother on Sundays. I live my life. Smaller than I planned, but still mine. I don't know how to live anymore, Claire admitted. I don't know who I'm supposed to be without her. I don't know how to be happy when she's dead. It feels like betrayal. Vincent turned to look at her properly for the first time. In the growing dawn light, he could see tears on her face. She was crying. Actually crying. Showing emotion. Feeling something. Your mother, he said carefully. Did she want you to be happy when she was alive? Yes, always. She worried about me too much. Always asking if I was okay, if I needed anything, if I was happy. Then why would she want different now? Why would dying change what she wanted for you? Claire's breath caught. But she's not here to see it. Maybe not. I don't know what happens after. But I know parents. I know what they want for their kids. My mother would be devastated if I stopped living because something bad happened. She'd haunt me herself. Vincent managed a small, sad smile. Being happy isn't betraying your mother. It's honoring her. It's saying that what she wanted for you still matters. They sat with that truth as the sun started to rise. Around them, the garden came alive with morning sounds. Birds, wind, the distant hum of traffic beyond the mansion walls. Why do you come here? Claire asked. To the garden. You could fold paper anywhere. Why here? Vincent thought about it. Honestly? At first I didn't even know you were here. I just needed somewhere quiet to clear my head before going home. Then I saw you and you looked so alone. It reminded me of the kids I used to care for. The ones who'd gone through something traumatic and couldn't find their way back. I couldn't leave you sitting there by yourself. Even if you didn't know I was here, even if it didn't matter. It mattered, Claire said softly. It still matters. The sunrise was full now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Vincent needed to leave soon. His shift at the diner started in an hour and he hadn't slept yet. But he stayed AFE. The shift happened so gradually that most people didn't notice. But Robert did. He watched his daughter move through the house with slightly less weight in her shoulders. She still attended the suitor performances, still sat through the elaborate attempts to make her smile. But there was something different in her eyes. Something awake. She was eating more. Mrs. Chen reported that breakfast trays were coming back empty instead of barely touched. The night security guard mentioned seeing lights in her room at odd hours, as if she was staying up doing something instead of just lying in the dark. Robert knew what she was doing. She was folding paper, preparing for her nightly meetings with the janitor who'd somehow reached her when everyone else failed. The media coverage had become overwhelming. News vans permanently camped outside the gates. Paparazzi with long lenses tried to catch glimpses of Claire. Entertainment shows ran weekly updates on the suitor competition. Social media was filled with opinions, criticism, conspiracy theories. Some people called Robert exploitative. Others called him desperate. Everyone had something to say, but none of them knew what was really happening in that garden at night. Robert's private investigation into Vincent's case had yielded gold. His legal team found the original hospital logs that showed discrepancies in the prescription records. They tracked down the doctor who'd made the error, now working at a different hospital who'd left a trail of similar mistakes. They interviewed nurses who'd worked that shift, who confirmed Vincent had followed protocol exactly. The hospital had known. They'd covered it up to protect themselves. Robert had everything he needed to clear Vincent's name, to restore his nursing license, to make him whole again, but he held back, unsure how to approach it without making Vincent feel like another person trying to use him. Then the situation took an unexpected turn. A famous entertainment blogger broke a story. Through some leaked information from a disgruntled staff member, they discovered the truth about the mystery man meeting Claire in secret. The janitor. The broke ex-nurse with a scandal in his past. The nobody competing against millionaires and celebrities for the ultimate prize. The story went viral instantly. Gold-digging janitor manipulates traumatized Iris, read one headline. Disgraced nurse schemes for billionaire's fortune, claimed another. Vincent's face, pulled from his old nursing ID, was plastered across every tabloid website. His entire history was dissected publicly. The medication error, the lawsuit, the debt, everything. Suddenly, everyone was an expert on Vincent Torres. People who'd never met him were certain he was a con artist. Social media exploded with theories about how he was manipulating Claire, playing the long game, pretending to be humble while secretly planning to steal the $100 million. Vincent found out when he showed up for his shift at the warehouse. His supervisor met him at the door. "You're that guy," he said, not quite accusatory but not friendly either. "The one on the news. The billionaire's daughter." "I'm just Vincent," he replied tiredly. "Same guy who's been working here for 2 years. Can't have that kind of attention here. Media circus following you around. It's bad for business. You're done just like that. No warning, no chance to explain." Vincent was fired from his second job. By the time he got home, reporters were waiting outside his apartment building. They shouted questions at him, asked if he loved Claire or just her money. Asked if he was proud of himself for taking advantage of a vulnerable woman. Asked how it felt to compete against his betters. Vincent pushed through them without responding. Inside his apartment, he sat on his worn couch and tried to process what was happening. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from people he hadn't talked to in years, some supportive, most judgmental. He turned it off. His mother called on the landline. "Vincent, are you okay? I saw the news. I'm fine, Ma. They're lying about you, saying terrible things. We should sue them." "With what money, Ma?" Vincent laughed bitterly. "I just lost another job. I can barely afford your medications as it is. Forget the medications. This is about your reputation, your life. My reputation was already destroyed 3 years ago. This is just round 2. He rubbed his eyes. "I'm tired, Ma. I'm just so tired." "Are you going to stop? Stop seeing this girl?" Vincent thought about Claire. About paper cranes and silent understandings and 2 broken people finding something like peace together. "No," he said. "I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not trying to take anything from anyone. I'm just folding paper with someone who needed a friend." "Then hold your head up," his mother said firmly. "You haven't done anything to be ashamed of. Let them talk." That night, Vincent almost didn't go to the mansion. The reporters had followed him, camped outside the estate gates with their cameras ready. Security had to escort him in, and he could hear the shouting, the accusations, the flash of cameras. He thought maybe he should stop. For Claire's sake, if not his own. This attention wasn't helping her. It was making everything worse. She didn't need this circus growing even larger. But when he reached the garden, she was already there. Waiting on her bench. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, and he saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Determination. "You came," she said. "Almost didn't." Vincent sat on his usual bench, keeping the distance they'd maintained. "You saw the news?" "All of it." Claire's voice was stronger than he'd heard it. "They're wrong about you. Doesn't matter what's true. Matters what people believe. It matters to me." They sat in silence for a moment. Vincent pulled out paper but found he couldn't focus on folding. His hands were shaking, not from fatigue this time but from anger and frustration and the unfairness of it all. "Why does this keep happening?" he asked, not really expecting an answer. "Why do I keep getting blamed for things I didn't do? What did I do to deserve this?" "Nothing," Claire said. "You didn't deserve any of it. Not the hospital thing, not this. The world isn't fair. It punishes good people and rewards bad ones all the time. It's random and cruel and it doesn't make sense." "Then why keep trying? Why keep going?" Claire was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "My therapist asked me that once. After the accident. Why was I still here if I didn't want to be? I didn't have an answer then. But maybe the answer is this. We keep going because giving up means they win. The drunk driver wins. The hospital wins. The media wins. Everyone who hurt us gets to take everything. But if we keep going, keep living, Keep finding small moments of peace like this. We take something back. Vincent looked at her properly. She was different from the ghost girl he'd first seen in this garden. More present, more real. Still sad, still carrying her grief, but alive in a way she hadn't been before. "When did you get so wise?" he asked. "I had a good teacher. Someone who showed me that being present matters more than being perfect." The next several days were brutal. Vincent lost his position at the diner too. The owner apologized, but said the constant reporters were driving away customers. Vincent was down to one job, the janitorial position at the Harrison estate, and even that felt precarious. The other suitors turned vicious. One of them, a hedge fund manager who'd spent weeks trying to impress Claire, held a press conference. He claimed Vincent was dangerous, that someone should investigate his background more thoroughly, that the Harrison family was being taken advantage of. Others joined in. The pile-on became intense. Social media was merciless. Vincent's face became a meme. People photoshopped him into various scenarios, all mocking his poverty, his failed career, his presumption. Know your place was a common theme. How dare a janitor think he could reach above his station? How dare he think he was worthy of a billionaire's daughter? Vincent stopped reading, stopped looking. He went to work, went to his mother's apartment, went to the garden. Those three places became his whole world. Everything else was hostile territory, but something unexpected started happening. A counter-movement began online. Real nurses who'd worked with Vincent came forward with stories of his kindness, his skill, his dedication to the children he'd cared for. Parents of his former patients posted videos thanking him for how he'd treated their kids. A few investigative journalists started digging into the hospital case and finding holes in the official story. The truth was fighting its way to the surface. Robert watched it all from his office, his legal team on standby. He'd planned to handle Vincent's case quietly, but now he wondered if a public vindication might be better. Let everyone see who Vincent really was. Let the truth drown out the lies. He made a decision and called his head lawyer. "File the motion to reopen the case. Make it public. I want everyone to know what that hospital did. And I want Vincent Torres's license restored." The lawyer nodded. "That's going to be a big fight. The hospital will push back hard. I don't care. I've got better lawyers and deeper pockets. We're doing this." Meanwhile, in the garden, Vincent and Claire continued their nightly ritual. The paper animals grew more complex. They started talking more, sharing stories about their lives before everything fell apart. Vincent told her about the kids he'd cared for, the families he'd helped. Claire told him about her mother, the good memories from before the accident. One night, about a week into the media storm, Claire did something unexpected. A famous comedian had performed that afternoon doing 30-minute. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning. Robert Harrison called a press conference at the mansion, something he'd never done in all the months of the Suitor Circus. Every major news outlet showed up. The front lawn became a sea of cameras and microphones and reporters jostling for position. Vincent was working his shift when Mrs. Chen found him. "Mr. Harrison wants you at the press conference. Says it's important." "I'm just the janitor," Vincent protested. "I don't need to be there. He specifically asked for you. Said you need to be standing with Claire." Vincent's stomach dropped. This was it. Robert was going to publicly reject him. Tell the world that his daughter deserved better than a broke ex-nurse with scandal in his past. It made sense. End the speculation. Protect Claire from further association with someone the media had labeled a gold digger. But when Mrs. Chen led him to the front entrance, Claire was there, waiting. She reached out and took his hand, something she'd never done before. Her palm was cold and trembling. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Me too. Whatever my father says, whatever happens, you know the truth, right? You know what we have is real?" Vincent squeezed her hand. "I know." They walked out together, hand in hand, into a storm of camera flashes and shouted questions. Robert stood at a podium, looking every bit the powerful billionaire. Behind him were several people Vincent didn't recognize. Lawyers, probably. Robert waited for the noise to die down. When he spoke, his voice was clear and firm. 3 months ago, I made a promise. I said I would give $100 million and my blessing for marriage to anyone who could make my daughter smile again. This promise came from desperation, from a father who'd watched his child disappear into grief and couldn't find a way to bring her back. The reporters leaned forward, cameras rolling. Over these months, hundreds of people have tried. Celebrities, professionals, well-meaning individuals. Some came for the money. Some came for the fame. A few came because they genuinely wanted to help. I'm grateful to everyone who tried. Robert paused, his eyes finding Claire in the crowd. But only one person succeeded. Only one person reached my daughter, and I think everyone here knows who that is. The cameras swiveled to Vincent and Claire. Vincent felt his face burn. He wanted to run, to escape, but Claire's hand tightened around his. Vincent Torres, Robert continued, a man who lost everything 3 years ago due to a miscarriage of justice. A man who works 3 jobs to support his mother and pay off debts that shouldn't exist. A man who never wanted my money, never competed for the prize, never even knew about the promise when he first sat with my daughter in our garden and folded paper beside her. The reporters were scribbling furiously. This wasn't the story they'd expected. Many of you have written articles about Mr. Torres. You've called him a con artist, a manipulator, a gold digger. You've questioned his motives and his character. You've made him a villain in a story where he was only ever trying to be kind. Robert's voice hardened. You were wrong. All of you. And I can prove it. He nodded to the lawyers behind him. One of them stepped forward with a folder of documents. 3 years ago, Vincent Torres was blamed for a medication error that nearly killed a child. He lost his nursing license, his career, and his reputation. The hospital claimed he'd administered the wrong dosage. But that was a lie. The crowd erupted with questions. Robert held up his hand for silence. My legal team has spent the past several weeks investigating this case. We've uncovered hospital logs that were accidentally left out of the original investigation. We've found the doctor who actually made the prescription error, a man with a history of similar mistakes that the hospital covered up. We've interviewed staff members who were pressured to stay silent. Vincent Torres was innocent. He followed protocol exactly. The hospital made him a scapegoat to protect themselves from a lawsuit. Robert looked directly at Vincent. As of this morning, we've filed a motion to have your case reopened and your nursing license restored. The hospital is already negotiating a settlement. They know they're going to lose. Vincent felt his knees go weak. Claire caught him, held him steady. But that's not why I called this press conference, Robert said. I called it because I owe Vincent Torres an apology. I owe my daughter an apology, and I owe all of you an explanation. He stepped away from the podium, walked down the steps, and approached Vincent and Claire directly. The cameras followed his every move. Vincent, you did something no one else could do. You saw my daughter not as a prize to be won, but as a person who needed space to heal. You didn't try to fix her. You didn't perform for her. You just existed beside her pain until she was ready to come back. That took patience, kindness, and a depth of character that all the money in the world can't buy. Robert turned to the reporters. My daughter smiled. For the first time in 3 years, she laughed. She's eating again. She's engaging with life again. She's healing. And it's because of this man right here who never wanted anything from her except to fold paper in peace. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. I made a promise, and I keep my promises. This envelope contains documents transferring $100 million in company shares to Vincent Torres. The crowd gasped. Cameras flashed. Vincent stood frozen, unable to process what he was hearing. Robert held out the envelope. Take it, you earned it. You saved my daughter's life. Vincent looked at the envelope, at Robert, at the cameras, at Claire, who was watching him with tears in her eyes. He didn't take it. I can't, Vincent said quietly. The murmuring stopped. Everyone strained to hear. I didn't sit with your daughter for money, Vincent continued, his voice growing stronger. I sat with her because she looked lonely, because I know what it's like to be broken and have everyone either ignore you or try to fix you wrong. I folded paper because it gave me peace, and maybe I thought it might give her peace too. That's it. That's the whole story. But the promise, Robert started. I don't want to be paid for being a decent human being, Vincent interrupted. If you want to do something for me, clear my name. Get my nursing license back. That's all I need. That's all I've ever needed. Robert studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. What about the debt? The legal fees? Your mother's medical expenses? Vincent hesitated. Pride warred with practical need. I can handle it. You're working one job now, Robert said gently. The press scared away your other employers. You can barely afford rent. Let me help. I don't need charity. It's not charity. Consider it compensation for services rendered. You've been helping my daughter heal. That's more valuable than any therapy I could buy. Let me pay you what that's actually worth. Vincent looked at Claire. She nodded slightly, encouraging him. Just the debt, Vincent finally agreed. Clear the legal fees. Help with my mother's medications. That's it. No millions. No marriage arrangement. Just enough to breathe. Robert smiled. Deal. But I'm also offering you a job. Full-time. I'm funding a new children's hospital and I want you as the head pediatric nurse once your license is restored. Triple whatever you were making before. Full benefits. Your mother gets free health care for life. Vincent's breath caught. Why would you do that? Because you're exactly the kind of person who should be working with children. Because 3 years ago you were wrongly accused and the system failed you. And because my daughter would like you to stay in her life and I've learned not to ignore what makes my daughter happy. He turned to the reporters again. So here's the real story. The janitor didn't win the prize. He rejected it. Because he's not a gold digger. He's not a con artist. He's a good man who life treated badly, and who somehow stayed good anyway. That's the story you should be writing. Robert looked back at Vincent and Claire. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a hospital board to destroy and a legal case to win. You two should probably go back to your garden. I hear you have paper to fold. The press conference ended in chaos. Reporters shouted questions. Social media exploded with hot takes. But Vincent and Claire slipped away in the confusion, returning to the quiet of the garden they'd claimed as their own. They sat on their usual benches, though the distance between them felt different now. Smaller somehow, like they'd crossed something together. I smiled, Claire said. I didn't even realize it at first, but during the press conference when you rejected the money, I smiled. A real one. I missed it, Vincent admitted. There'll be others. I'm not fixed. I'm not suddenly happy all the time. But I think maybe I'm ready to try. Ready to remember that joy isn't betrayal, that living isn't forgetting. That's all anyone can do, Vincent said. Just try. Just keep showing up. 6 months later, Vincent stood in a hospital corridor wearing scrubs that still felt strange after so long. His nursing license had been restored. His name had been cleared. The hospital that had wronged him had settled for an amount that covered all his debt and his mother's medical expenses for years. He had a job he loved, working with children again, remembering why he'd become a nurse in the first place. Claire volunteered at the hospital twice a week. She worked with the child life specialists, helping kids process trauma and grief. She was good at it. Patient and understanding in ways only someone who'd lived through darkness could be. They still folded paper. Still met in gardens, though not as often. Claire had rejoined the world slowly but surely. As he come,